All right. Welcome to the next episode of the Courage Coaching and Counseling Podcast. And today's guest is Cyndi Doyle. She is a therapist, she is a podcaster, and she is also the author of Hold the Line, the essential guide to protecting your law enforcement relationship. So thank you, Cyndi, for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so excited to be here. We were talking before you hit record, and I feel like this is the perfect mesh or combination or merge. It's like the Venn diagram, and this is like the middle of it all because I love to talk about courage and authenticity. And then I love to talk about, how I've used it and shown up in my life and the book and everything else. And I'm just so excited to be here. So thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yeah, you share the importance of courage with your clients, but writing a book and launching a book this week, that's courageous too.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's it for sure was something that I said I would never do.
Mm,
In fact, one of the I try, I network a lot within my law enforcement community or first responder community, and I do not believe in scarcity. I believe that there's plenty of people to help in the world, and so my thoughts are abundance. And so, how can I help other people? What message do you have that maybe I don't say it in the same way? And when there was another author named Vicky, and she and I met for coffee, and I said, "Oh, I'll never write a book."
mm.
And here I am
Yes.
writing a book. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, and that was just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
And
it
I
happens.
do want to say for any listener who's about to click off because it's about law enforcement, this book is about marriage and it helps couples and individuals in a difficult marriage. Lessons. I'm going to be recommending this to my couples who aren't uh, in law enforcement or first responders, but thank you for writing the book, Cyndi, because um,
Oh,
my daughter, my son-in-law is a deputy. He got sworn in when they were engaged, and
mm,
I have been praying for them like
mhm.
ever since. And so this book is very honest about the challenges, but it's very hopeful and very practical. And I was like, relieved that you wrote this book. Uh, so let's dive in. Can you say a little bit more about how you w- how you did write the book? How you came to the decision that like I am going to write this book?
Yeah. I was, I had a wake up call in my own relationship. And about 2013, 14, somewhere in there, um, I realized that I had really checked out mentally. I figured something was going on. I mean, people had always told me that, oh, well, he's a police officer, he's a cop, he's going to be impacted, and you kind of just got to suck it up. That's pretty much what I was told. Oh, it changes them. And so you've just got to accommodate. Well,
Mm,
I'm a Texas girl and I'm a little bit strong-willed. And so that doesn't always work for me.
mm,
But I realized I was changing. I was walking on eggshells. I had muted myself in a big way.
mm.
When I tried to have conversations with my husband, he would do that gesture with his hand of like, come on, hurry up.
Mm.
He would say
Get to
things
the
like,
point.
yeah, get to the point. He would say that. He was like, "Is there a point to this?"
Mm,
And which just shut me down and shut me up. And I thought there has got to be something here. And it took me a long time to research it, but I was looking for a book that told me the underpinning is what I call it. Like what's
mm,
underneath this? I didn't want just like fluff. And I didn't, and there's a lot of good books out there. I'm not slamming any of the books, but none of them hit me. I didn't want to just pray about it. I didn't want to just like trust that it would all be okay. I wanted to
right.
know what was going on and how I could impact it. And there wasn't really anything out there. And so the more I dug in, the more I did, I started doing a podcast in 2017. after the shooting, the Dallas shooting,
Mm.
and really started trying to support my
Yeah.
community, and just trying to bring us together and say, hey, it's okay to grieve. It's okay to be scared of what's going on, and try to share information that I was feeling like, how do I support? How do we support our spouses? What's getting going on? And so I started really sharing about my relationship, and I just got a lot of good feedback.
Mm.
And I finally, actually, Joe Muirhead is the one who, she's a counselor in Australia of all places, but she and I met, and she and I were talking, and she said, you have to write this book. This
Mm.
has to be done.
Mm.
And I kind of went, then COVID hit. I'm like, well, I got time. So I really pushed. I pushed myself. And it was, I remember getting on a plane. I started it in, I was coming home from Albuquerque in March when I was like, COVID's not really a thing. um, and started writing the intro in the plane, and I thought, wow, this is going to be emotional. So it really comes from a place
Mm.
of wanting to impact others and wanting to share, hey, this is the information. My goal in the book and the goal of Code4Couples and my podcast is to three pronged normalize experiences. It's to educate, like really educate what's going on, what's the psychology, what's the neurobiology going on, and then to empower couples, looking at what makes a strong relationship. In this book, I talk about the conflict of the impact, the psychological and neurobiological impact, and then how do we overcome that as a couple.
Right.
um, so that was really
I
kind of
love
my,
that. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
no, it's okay. It was really kind of my inspiration in the sense of like, all right, I've got to put it down in writing so people can have it all. And um, I don't, it wasn't something that I was like, woohoo, I'm going to write a book. It was very reluctant. I can tell you
Mm.
that.
Mm.
Um, and so it's just like, oh, I've got to do this because this is not about me. It really wasn't. It's really about all those other millions of couples out there that are struggling as first responders, and how can we impact them. It's really about them.
Yeah. Yeah. You uh you say uh your marriage doesn't have to be a statistic, that you can respond and to the challenges. One thing that surprised me in the book, Cyndi, is that you share that uh, officers aren't don't statistically have a higher incidence or rate of mental health disorders from their work. Um, and so the stereotype is that they're gonna suffer from PTSD. They're gonna be like vulnerable to addiction and divorce and mental illness. So that was helpful to see, but it does change you if you let it, if you don't take
Yeah,
proactive action, and it does have an impact on your relationship. So
for
could
sure.
would love to hear hear a little bit more about the spillover, because you said you got to the point 12 years in that you were just done
Hmm.
accommodating,
Yeah, I was.
and he had no idea. Your husband had no idea.
Yeah, he really had no idea. I'm a very good actress. No, I it's um I I talked about like kind of a different muted version of myself.
Mm.
And I was supportive because the conflict for me was to be supportive and to show up. And so I could be supportive. I could make us lunches. I could like say, have a good day. I was physically in my relationship. I hadn't gone emotionally elsewhere, but I had very much shut off emotionally because
Mm.
there was a lack of empathy. There was a contempt, I would say, within our relationship. Part of the impact of law enforcement, the spillover that you're talking about, or that I mentioned in the book too, which by the way came from a research article. I found that research article and I was like, like it was such, I was like, yes, 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 this is exactly what it is.
Mm,
That it's a ripple effect, just like so many events or careers, they have this ripple effect. And so when somebody's working shift work, sleeping during the day, you're having to accommodate for them. You start to live an independent life from each other.
right. You're just
Um,
missing each other.
yeah, I
It
mean,
was
there was,
shocking to when I read how little time you guys spent for
yes,
years.
yeah, for years, for 5 years. And I thought it was shorter. My husband was like, no, honey, it was from the here to here. There was 5 years where we basically kind of just passed each other. Every now and then he'd wake up and he'd have breakfast and I'd have something to eat with him maybe, but we really didn't connect at all. And at that point in time, the department has since switched schedules where officers have every other weekend off, but at that point in time he was working 8-hour shifts, 10-hour shifts, maybe, I don't remember, but he was gone, and it was like years of no weekends. So
Mm,
but the spillover effect is this: as a first responder, not just law enforcement. I mean, I want to include like dispatchers, EMS, paramedics, firefighters. They, mental health counselors sometimes in the field too, depending upon what you're doing. Is the first responders have to kind of cut off emotionally from what they're doing.
mm,
They have to see, like, this is a scene, this is a body, this is an event, and they have to move through it in a way that doesn't impact their ability to recover. And so they have to tune it out. Brene Brown says, when you numb the dark, you numb the light. And so they cut off emotionally in order to be able to do what they do on a regular basis. They don't have the time to recover in the way that they really need to recover. And so they live this, if you will, kind of a muted emotional existence because they're just trying to deal with the day. And so as a spouse, if I'm trying to connection comes in empathy. You can stand in each other's shoes. I can feel what you feel.
mm.
And that's hard. Many first responders feel incredibly guilty for leaving their families. This is where I'm going to get emotional. I can feel it. But
Mm,
a lot of first responders feel incredibly guilty for leaving their families. They feel like they're failing. They're out busy protecting the community and they can't protect their own families
yeah,
because in danger, they're going out. And so they're like, lock the windows, lock the doors, hide in the basement. But that's hard for them because they can't protect you.
yeah,
And it was hard for me to see his point of view, and it was definitely hard for him to see my point of view. Um, and really uncomfortable when I started to open up, when I realized I don't want to live this relationship the way I'm continuing to live it.
yeah.
Um,
You weren't willing
and
to
he
keep
looks
muting yourself.
no, I had an awakening in me that I was incredibly contemptuous towards the department. I
Mm,
the department always came first. Whatever the department needed, it got. I got
mm,
squat.
mm,
So I got mad, and I loved him and he loved me. He was like, if you saw us from the outside, everybody was like, oh, y'all are so good together. I'm like,
mm,
yes, because when we were together, we made the most of it. It was like a honeymoon because we got to see such a little time with each other that we wanted to try to make it work. But independently, like I remember being in my car driving home one night from work and just crying and cussing because I was so pissed.
mm,
The big event for us was he couldn't go on this planned vacation that we had with my parents. He was like, "Oh nope, I'm sorry, I have to stay here. Department needs me." And I'm like, "I'm sick of this, sick of it." So
mm,
so yeah, I made the decision like that wasn't going to be my relationship, and so that's when we had some hard conversations um, out on the front porch. We call it porch time. So we had some hard conversations out on the porch, and um, and drank some wine
To take the
and
edge
just
off
kind of opened
and
take
and
the edge
opened up.
off. Yeah, just kind of opened up, and it came out slowly. I didn't like it wasn't like vomiting all over him. I would kind of test things out.
Because you're a
Let me drop
professional.
this one.
You know how to.
Let me drop this one. And it's funny now, like he's learned to kind of well, he's learned a lot to modify what he's done over the years. And he used to be very sharp. Like I said, hurry up. Is there a point to this? He would also be very sharp with me. I would say something and he'd snap. And then I'd just shut down and not say anything.
Mm,
And now he'll say something and I'll raise my one eyebrow. It's kind of like a mom look.
mm.
So I'll raise my left eyebrow and say, "Do you want to try that again?" And he'll say, "Let me try that again." And he'll back up and he'll try it again, because I could go on and talk about this, which is why I wrote a book, right? But there's aspects of their career that just spills over, like the way they speak. Um, Officers and first responders in general are very staccato. Facts, 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 because they got to get to the scene, they got to take care of things, they need to control a scene, and so it's a lot of control. And
Mm.
they don't mean to do it purposefully, to say, "Oh, I've got to control my relationship or control my family." It's all about conditioning. This is where the psychology and the neurobiology come in the sense of like their brain becomes conditioned to react and respond a certain way. um, and that's a big part of what spills over. So that was a long answer to
Oh
your
no,
question, but
that
hopefully I hit it all.
yeah, yeah, that's great. The can you say a little bit more about the OODA that you mentioned?
The Ooda
Yeah.
Loop.
Uda,
That's what we
Uda.
call it. So it's
Yes.
the Ooda Loop. So the Ooda Loop is actually the very first inkling that I got that something was going on with my husband. I was at a conference, Texas Counseling Association conference, and I was a military veteran who was talking about PTSD, and he was talking about combat PTSD in particular, and he was talking about the combat aspect of being in a war zone. And he talked about this Ooda Loop, which was um, orient, observe, decide, and act. And so in that Ooda Loop, it's something that so the story is he was talking about this Ooda Loop, and I texted my husband and I was like, "Do you Ooda?" He's like, "Where are you?" But yes, it was that kind of a thing. But with the OODA loop, what's going on is it's a process of continually orienting and deciding whether or not you need to do something or not do something. Part of what keeps first responders safe is continually, I can't get that out, continually observing their world, people in it. How is this situation changing? And so the process is they orient to, I think actually observe is first. They observe where they are. Is it orient? Now I got to remember. Hold on one second. I can get this wrong too. Observe. I get those mixed up. Okay, so I'm going to back up.
Observe, and then orient. Yeah.
So the first one is observe and then orient. So observe where they are, what's going on, uh, what's the situation that they're in. They're going to orient to it, which means like looking for how do I get out? Where am I going to duck? Where am I going to, what can I pick up if I need to throw something at someone? That's
Mm,
what that is. And then decide, is there a reason that they need to be involved and engaged? And if so, then they act. So the process is, you think about observing what else going on all the time, that constantly is changing in the environment, and then continually orienting to what's going on, what's changing, and then that constant decision making process. So this is part of like a loop that just runs in their head over and over again. And it's different for different first responders. With law enforcement that are on the street, they're constantly having to observe and orient to what's going on, who's here, what cars is coming, if there are emergency personnel on a scene. Like, let's say, I work with a lot of firefighters, and they're always like, the worst thing is when they're having to stop traffic in order to take care of a scene.
Mm.
And there'll be a couple of guys that are people, individuals watching what's going on with traffic, or people, is this car not watching to see where they're coming, and do I need to jump out of the way, do I need to say get out of the way?
It's
So that
dangerous. Yeah.
process is continue. Yes, it protects them, but it protects them at work, but it doesn't shut off when they're at home, because it becomes just like any habit, it becomes conditioned into their brain. So the way that works, or the way it kind of spills over, is that, I could be out to dinner with my husband, and he's in an Ooda Loop because he's in a public environment. And so he's constantly observing to see what's going on, and his brain just takes over. And the way I see that as a spouse is, you're not paying attention to me. I'm boring. Is that waitress more attractive than I am? You're looking at the door. Do we need to go? I used to say to my husband all the time, do you have someplace to be?
Mm.
Do we
Mhm.
do you got a date with somebody else? What's going on
Right.
here?
Right.
But it constantly goes on. And first responders aren't educated that that loop is a part of what keeps them safe, and it doesn't shut off when they go home.
Mhm. Yeah. The uh, being in that mindset. You mentioned that uh, officers are just exposed to uh, uh, the, the negative side of people. They can develop skepticism and cynicism, so they're constantly looking out for threats uh, uh, to their safety, and they're also kind of have a bias
Right.
or a lens towards the negative, and uh, it
Yeah.
uh, the way you described the irritability, and or just grumpiness, uh, uh, I think that
Yes.
section of the book will help a lot of couples because um, uh, couples that where one of their partners struggles with like a high stress job, um, or poor
Right.
boundaries with work life balance, and they're coming home and they're wiped out, or they're in a negative work environment or interactions with their customers, and they just like take it out at home. It's it it's hard uh, to talk about that because, like you said, you want to be supportive as a spouse. You want to be understanding. Um,
Right.
but a lot of
Right.
spouses just sacrifice uh, what they want and what they need in the relationship too.
Right. Yeah, and you're exactly right. Is that that aspect? It's kind of like that lens that they have to look through, right? So if I'm dealing with angry customers all day long, or I mean, I could even think of like a call center, and people are just yelling at them, or anybody who's I mean, I think of like medical personnel that people are like lying in order to get what they want. I mean, I could think of so many different things. Um,
Mm.
Even in the profession of a mental health counselor, it's like, oh, everybody's struggling with depression, or it's there's always helplessness, right? It changes our view, and so we wind up focusing on that. The other aspect of that too is that we are constantly bombarded with negative media too, and so it almost reinforces that negativity over and over again. um, and so it can impact anybody. And so it's really hard. It has to be purposeful to change that. And that's an aspect of resilience, when couples or individuals can understand, hey, I deal with this negative side all of the time. I've really got to work to see the positive in the world. Our brain is there to keep us safe, not make us happy. And so our brain is going to say, see, that's dangerous. See, that's dangerous. That's dangerous. And so it becomes this, heavy filter of danger as opposed to or cynicism, however you want to look at it,
Hmm.
as opposed to looking at the good in humanity and filtering in the beauty in life, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. One concept that was new to me that I learned from your book was compassion, satisfaction, and that that definitely resonated with me uh, as a therapist. I think therapists are vulnerable to
Mm,
our compassion, satisfaction dropping, just like um, law enforcement, where you get um, compassion fatigue uh, and
yeah.
burned out.
Yes. It can roll
Um,
right into that if you don't watch.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, so that idea of compassion satisfaction is what what satisfaction do we get out of helping people? Like, do we feel satisfied in the way that we're contributing back, or does it feel like it is impactful? Do we feel like it makes a difference? And when you look at first responders, nobody ever calls and says, "Hey, I have this really great thing happening. Do you want to come over and celebrate with me?" Like, that doesn't happen, right? It's everybody is helpless. And then a lot of people, I joke, there's a joke within first responder community, like there's nobody ever hated a fireman. Like, honestly, like firemen are loved. They're like, "Oh,
Oh,
you're
right.
amazing." Right?
Get the calendar. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas law enforcement, they're like, "Oh, y'all are all a-holes." It's just like that's what it looks like. And so especially with
Mhm.
first responders, or with law enforcement, everybody, they want them to show up when they're needed, and then they hate them otherwise. They're doing a job of
Mhm.
enforcing the laws. They don't make the laws, they just have to enforce them. Um and so that compassion satisfaction of like, do I feel like I make a difference? And my husband will joke, because when he now I he walked into this career, when I met him. You can laugh all you want about the decision I made 22 years ago. But when I met my husband, he was unemployed. And we walked down the aisle and he still didn't have a job. So there's that. He
Mm.
had gone to the police
Love conquers
academy.
all. You guys
Love
were in love.
conquers all, right? I'll support you. Um, but he had gone to police academy, and so I knew he was going on the right path. But he told me, he said, I think I want to be a police officer. And I naively said, yes, you can go and help people. Now, this is 1999, before 9/11 and a lot of other aspects that have happened in the last 5-6 years as far as policing and how things have changed over the years. But
Mm, mm,
he originally said, I said, "Why did you want to be a police officer?" And he says, "Well, because I want to help and protect my community."
right.
That was his answer. Now, like, probably he a little bit more cynical, and he's like, "I just wanted to, like, kick ass," is what he'll say. And I'm like, "No, you didn't. No, you
Mm,
didn't. That's not what you wanted to do." Um, but
mm,
originally, most first responders, most law enforcement officers get into the field because they want to help and protect others. Um, I think it's like 50% of law enforcement officers have some type of trauma in their background, or they do it to kind of compensate for an injustice that they felt growing up. So it might be somebody who was hurt, and maybe they didn't have the family life that they wanted to growing up, or some kind of abuse. And so um, they have hurting hearts sometimes. And so they want to help other people. And
yeah.
then they get into it, and it just kind of, it changes because of what they do on a daily basis. So that compassion satisfaction, that satisfaction they get from serving their community, it's the research article that I was quoting in the book. It's, the last couple years is that compassion satisfaction has diminished greatly. And the article said 4 out of 10 officers have low compassion satisfaction. They're not getting what they want from their job. They don't feel like they're helping anymore. They feel like they're hated,
Yeah.
and not appreciated. Um, and officers are leaving in droves right now. A lot of departments are struggling, but that
Yeah.
comes over at home too in a relationship. That anxiety, depression, that winds up impacting mental health.
Mhm.
Um, so, yeah.
Yeah. That's so hard. So, Cindy, what could you take a few moments to what would you share with a younger couple, um, who where the cynicism and the stress and the anger are creeping in, um, and they're struggling with connecting.
I think there's multiple aspects. One of the mm, I don't know what I call it, themes. I'll call it a theme. One of the themes throughout my book is that you have to stand in each other's shoes. So having an understanding of what it's like to be the other partner. So what is it like to be tiptoeing around while you're sleeping? What's it like for you to not
Mm,
be there? What's it like to show up to events alone? What is it like to have the kids all day and try to keep them quiet? It for me it was the we didn't have children, but it was like making sure the dogs didn't bark, and I couldn't vacuum until like 7:30 when he went to work and cleaned the house. There were all these ways that I strategically did things in order to not disturb his sleep.
mm,
So, and also from the spouse's perspective, standing in your officer's shoes or your first responder shoes and seeing it. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from that concept, because people are like, well, I should do that anyway. And I'm like, well, yes, for
mm.
sure. Like,
But
what's it like to be your spouse, and how are they hearing
right,
you, and how are they seeing you? And are you being the person you want to be in the relationship, and are you able to give empathy to your spouse? So I would say that's the first part.
mm,
The second part is really having a practice of mindfulness. And by that, what I mean is you've got to open up that lens. You can't stay so focused on that negative perspective. You've got to look at the good in humanity. You've got to find something, whether that is flowers blooming. That's part of what I did during COVID is like I would look and I would be like, okay, the world is still moving on. Look at these lovely flowers that are blooming. There is still good in the world. We don't have to fear all the time. So practicing some sense of mindfulness. I am not a mindfulness expert. There are a lot of other ones out in the world. I do mention some of that in my book, but really practicing some kind of mindfulness, practicing mindfulness as to how are you doing? What are you feeling? Where is your pain? Where is your hurt? And then the third aspect is I would say have some kind of ritual of connection,
mm,
some kind of ritual. And this is from Gottman. The Gottmans talk about a ritual of connection, and this is necessary for couples to be successful. But some kind of ritual of connection to be able to talk to your spouse. A lot of a lot of first responder couples think that they need to be, I'm going to do air quotes here, strong, for each other. And so
mm,
they think, and this is what I did. I thought being strong was not putting my stuff on him, right? I don't want to burden him with my stuff. And he didn't want to burden me with his stuff. But that is the exact opposite of what you need to do. What y'all need to do is it's like a three-legged race, right? So you've got to be connected to each other, like use each other for support, and find some kind of synchronicity to be. I think about that three-legged race. If you've ever been at a picnic, family picnic thing, right? And so you got to find that sync of how you're going to do this. And it's like we're going to lean on each other and we're going to support each other. And I have areas of strength, he has areas of strength, and where can we find, like, support each other and find that balance and lean on each other. um
I love that.
that's
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of first responder families just think, oh, I need to be strong and not burden is a big word, burden
Mm,
my spouse. And I'm like, you're not burdening your spouse or significant other if you are supporting, because it's It's supposed to go both ways. Like you have to share, you have to open up, and you have to allow your significant other to support you
Mhm.
as much as you're willing to support them, because that's only fair and it builds intimacy.
Yeah. Uh, I love you put it in exclamation point. Stop stuffing and share.
Yes.
Yeah. So share, yeah, share and support. It just gets worse the more you
Hmm.
stuff. Um,
Hmm. And it
I,
comes out sideways. That's why I say, like, it
yeah.
comes out sideways. If you stuff and stuff and stuff, and that's what happened with me, is it would come out sideways. I was the silent one, so I would just be like, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. And in
Mm,
my head, I was saying all kinds of other things, but um and he called it out at one point in time, and he's like, "Quit looking at me with that look." And I'm like, "What look? I'm fine." Total lies.
mm, mhm.
So, yeah, it
Yeah.
comes out sideways if you
Yeah.
don't share.
So eventually he was able to read you and know
He
there's
he knew
something's
we
up.
would we
Yeah.
would have little short kind of like little spat and then move on. It
Right.
was easy to fight because we didn't see each other, so we'd have like a and kind of talk. But you know, we
Yeah.
yeah, we're all it was sometimes it lasted for 3 or 4 days because we just wouldn't see each other, and text message sucks. So
Nothing resolves. Yeah,
yeah.
a lot of couples they are busy so they don't resolve conflict, or they get
Mm-hmm.
busy so they don't have to deal with it, get busy with the
Mm-hmm.
kids or work. And um but I really like how you highlight the challenge of shift work. And a lot of families that they know, like mom or dad is going to be a zombie when they for a
Mm-hmm.
day to recover. But
Mm-hmm.
I also like how you explained that when uh, an officer goes through like a critical incident, or something that triggers the hypervigilance, that can take 18 to 24 hours to recover from that, the stress of that.
Yeah. So and hypervigilance is present. It goes on every day when they go to work. So they are constantly in a state of hypervigilance. If I'm driving around a city watching for traffic or looking for crime, I'm constantly, and also scared of being shot at. I'm
Mm,
constantly in this heightened state because my brain is working to keep me safe. So it's a biological response. And I know as mental health counselors, we think, okay, well, because this is what I learned as a counselor. It's like, okay, well, there's a trigger. And so there's the hypervigilance. But with first responders, and it's different in the different disciplines. Um, but with first responders, they're ping and they go. So with firefighters, a lot of times they hear those tones, bing, and they go. As soon as those tones hit, they are in a state of hypervigilance. And depending upon what their day looks like, they could stay in that state of hypervigilance all day long.
mm,
Dispatcher, same way. As soon as that phone rings or as soon as that tone goes off, hypervigilance. Police officers, especially ones that are on the streets, detectives, any, even admin can have that state of hypervigilance because it becomes conditioned. So they stay at this like all day long, as opposed to when we think of as mental health professionals, like somebody gets their trauma gets triggered and it just pops up, and then they come down. Whereas they stay there for, my husband used to have 12-hour shifts, so he's at this constant state of hypervigilance for 12 hours, which means he comes home and he's no good because what
mm,
comes up must come down. Right.
mm,
So, and he's going back on duty way before 18 hours. He goes back on, so he would work 6 to 6, 6 A. If he worked 6 P to 6 A, he comes home, he gets some sleep, gets about 6 hours sleep or whatever, and he's right back on duty 12 hours later. So
yeah.
that's a big part of it.
Yeah. And that's um I I used to work 12-hour shifts for
Mm.
as a sleep tech. I used to watch people sleep. So I
Oh.
remember that season for about 3 years um where it's just work and sleep. It's just
Mhm.
it's just work and recovering from work. There's not much
Mhm.
room, and maybe a little. connection with my wife Julie, but there's not much connection with anybody else
Mm-mm.
because nobody else has your shift unless they're
Right.
law enforcement, and those guys are tired too,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
on their days off. So you're not necessarily hanging out with them so much, um, and it can get lonely,
It's very lonely. It's
and
lonely on both ends.
yeah,
And I failed to realize how lonely it was for him, and that's why,
mm,
I preach like you've got to see through your spouse's eyes, your significant other's eyes, and see what it's like and what they're missing. Part of that you're talking about working nights and you're missing the daytime, you're missing the activities, you're missing the interactions, and it's the same thing that they experience as well. It's like, on spouse side, I could be upset that, like I said, I don't have kids, but like you're not at my kid's ball game, rah, right? Or I'm always having to run them around, or I have to do all the errands. Um, and you don't think about the spouse's side to say like, God, it sucks for them. And so, yeah, but it's exhausting because, and then
yeah,
you're sleep deprived and people are like, oh, I'll catch up on sleep. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. You can't just like, I'm going to sleep some extra hours tomorrow and it'll be okay. Like your body doesn't
right,
work that way. It takes
right,
weeks to
yeah,
be able to do it.
yeah.
So,
You get used to doing it because you're a veteran and you do it for months and years, uh, but you don't realize the toll it takes, and sometimes, like I work with firefighters and police officers,
mhm,
it takes a toll somewhere.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And usually it's on their mental health, or it could be mental health, physical health, relational health, it could be anywhere. My husband retired 15 days ago, and I know I'm so
awesome.
excited for him. I was scared, but I'm excited for him. And it's funny, like he'll purposefully say, okay, I'm not going to set the alarm clock, because he's so used to like having to get up,
Mm,
or he was on call 24/7 for a couple of years, and so the phone always had to be on. And I got conditioned to hearing the phone go off. I'm like, whatever, go in the other room. At first I'd be like, what's going on, is it okay? And now I'm like, leave, get out, you're disturbing my sleep. But yeah, he's finding like that decompression, unwinding. He's like, it's kind of crazy. um he'll be like, I slept till 7. I'm like, wow. So,
yeah,
and his
or
mood is different. He's already kind of chilled out a little bit, where he's a little bit more calmer. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
he's still
After
double A
two
personality,
two
but
two de- two
whatever.
dec 2 decades of that, um,
Yeah.
it's gonna take some getting used to.
Yeah.
But wow, that's exciting. So, um, let's shift to like. So then, what's next for you guys?
No idea. You had that question, and I'm like, well, Cindy's going to keep doing what Cindy does. I'm going to continue what I'm doing. And I'm having some folks reach out to me as far as like, hey, are you doing this kind of training? Have you thought about this? So I think there's some training that I might do that incorporates him as well, because he can definitely, relate to first responders in a different way than I can.
Mm,
And so I think we'll probably be talking about how he can work with me to do some of that impact, or to make some of that impact. I've told him he needs to take a year off, though. So I've told him he needs to take a year, just kind of plug back into the world in a different way.
mm,
I imagine that he will go back to his first love, which is cooking. He
mm,
loves to cook, and he is no shabby cook. He made me some amazing saffron risotto with grilled uh, veal chops with a thyme blood orange mm, glaze or something on it last
yeah,
night. I mean, this is the kind of guy he is. He loves um like that's his creativity, if you will, is
nice.
food. So,
That sounds like something from Master Chef or Top
oh
Chef.
yeah, he loves all that. Quick story, really quickly. I love to tell this story. So his family owned a restaurant years ago, and so he grew up in the restaurant
Oh,
industry,
okay.
and he went to culinary school and quit because they weren't teaching him anything. So
Mm,
that's my husband for you. So I was like, "You quit?" He goes, "Yeah, they weren't teaching me anything. I can learn all this in the kitchen or experiment myself." I'm like, "Okay." So he'll figure it all out.
he's gonna be fine.
He'll be
He's
I
gonna be
think he'll
fine.
be fine.
Yeah, yeah.
I think he'll be fine. I'm waiting. As a counselor myself who works with first responders, I also am very aware that many times there is a delayed PTSD reaction
Mm,
when things stop. When first responders are going and going and going.
mm,
And I think this happens with other people too. We have a trauma or we have something that happens to us, and we just keep busy, right?
mm.
And so the more you stay busy, the longer you kind of push it to the back. But then when we're forced to stop, oh, I don't know, like in a pandemic, it kind of like you turn around and it's this ginormous tidal wave that kind of
Yeah.
sweeps you away. So
Those feelings
you may be
are
fortunate or
have been
unfortunate that
waiting
I'm
to be
looking
felt.
after him. Yeah, all those feelings.
Mm.
So, I'll be stretching myself a little bit more. It's always you're talking about this and I realize like you can't see, like I'm wringing my hand and like rubbing my leg underneath here because
You're
I know
anticipating
that
some stuff. Yeah.
I know I'm going to have to stretch myself even more
Mm.
and
You
get
know too
more
much,
out of my
Cyndi.
comfort zone. I've got to get out of my comfort zone
Mm,
and I know this. And
mm,
I've been, like I said, the book was, and what I do as far as working with first responders wasn't about like how do I make money. It was because you know I do in my therapy room, but that's about it.
mm,
But it's more about like what's the impact. And I realize, especially with all the feedback that I've amazingly positive feedback that I've received from the book, I realize that I'm going to be pushed out of my comfort zone even more to do something for the first responder community. And
mm,
I have even mental health professionals reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, I have some ideas. How did you do this?"
mm.
Um, and pushing themselves out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Um, I know I have another venue as far as I've developed a resiliency kind of acronym that I did for the Texas Counseling Association keynote conference, and I'm going to be building that out somehow too. There's a lot of I have this big idea fairy that his name is Biff, the big idea fairy.
Nice.
And so the last probably 4 years has really been about me embracing Biff and stop hiding from him,
Mm,
and start living in a different way and living bigger and being okay with failing and being okay with jumping,
yeah.
if you will.
That's courageous. That um fear is courageous or infectious
Yeah.
and contagious, but courage is too.
Yes.
Um
And you can't have one without the other,
mm,
right?
mm,
Nobody did anything brave without being scared, right? And so you have to like fear and courage go together.
right.
And one of my friends, Kate, I've learned to move my fear around into, or my anxiety. I'll call it my anxiety. I just identify as anxiety, right? And I've learned to say
Mm,
like, okay, that may be a mix of fear and excitement. And if that's what that is, then I
mm,
need to say, oh, okay, this is something that's worth doing.
mm.
And so my friend Kate Walker, who's here in Texas, she's like, she gave me a hashtag. And so my hashtag is fear is my love language.
Fear is my love language. Okay. That's embracing it. Yeah. That's not running from it.
Yeah, it's the best embrace I can do.
Wow. I your book, what you just described, you wrote your book for other couples so they don't have to go through the pain and um but you're gonna need your own book in some of the days ahead probably. It's so practical. It's so
Yeah,
practical.
it's Thank you.
So as we wind down our time, any last thoughts that you want to share, Cyndi?
Oh my gosh, last thoughts. Just because I know your audience there's this cross between courage, and I really loved that about your podcast. I I really encourage all of you to think about what gets lost if you do not take that step of courage. If
Mm,
you do not do that, whatever that thing is that you're thinking, man, I have some passion here, or I feel strongly about this, or I want to speak up about this, or I want to write about this. Like, who loses in you doing that? And that's really what I want to encourage all of you to think about, is that it- kind of going beyond ourselves, and what's the impact? What are the ripples effect of you being scared and doing it anyway, to walk out in courage? Because I know it took a lot of moments of wanting to throw up along the way for me to be like, ugh, I'm gonna do this thing. But you know what? And I will on my Instagram, on my Cyndi Doyle Instagram, my Cyndi underscore Doyle Instagram, like that, I talk about that a little bit, in the sense of like, I have to keep remembering it's not about me. It's about the ripple effect, and how is my voice, how is the way I speak about things, how is my narrative, how is my story, how is my falling down, how is my fear, my failures, how can that go on and help somebody else?
mm,
And I think that's what we have to do in courage, is think about, at least for me, I try to think about how, if I don't do the act that takes courage, what happens and who loses. So I'll leave it
yeah,
there.
great. Thank you so much. Uh, Cyndi Doyle book Hold the Line is launching this week, and uh, you can learn more and hear more from Cyndi on the Code for Couples podcast. Uh, uh, you you said that you didn't want you don't want couples to be a statistic, um, that you made wanted to make a difference in writing this book, Cyndi, and I, I am certain it will for many couples. So thank you again for writing it and coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.